You're listening to the fifth episode of season 4 of the Christian Revolution Radio podcast. My name is Novi Craven. I'm your host for today's episode. As we close Special Olympics year-long celebration of our founder, Eunice Kennedy Shriver centennial, we will be talking with Mary Hammerbacher Manner, who volunteered as a counselor at Camp Shriver in 1963. Eunice Kennedy Shriver began Camp Shriver in her backyard at Timberland Estate in 1962. Eunice and her brother, John F. Kennedy, had a sister named Rosemary with intellectual disabilities. Due to their experience with their sister, they decided to hold a day camp for kids from D.C. and Maryland who had intellectual disabilities at Camp Shriver. Campers were introduced to horseback riding, swimming, canoeing, and much more. For many campers, this was their first experience these activities and learning the skills required to participate in them. Mary Hammerbacher and her twin Anne applied to be volunteer camp counselors at the camp through their high school, and the two worked there from a few summers in 1960. The original Camp Shriver concluded in 1967, as the first Special Olympics Games were held in Chicago in 1968. Now, Special Olympics has grown into the world's largest organization for athletes with intellectual disabilities in the world. Why did you and your twin Anne want to become camp counselors for Camp Shriver?
It just seemed like something to do. It was something when our nun at school talked about it and asked if any graduating seniors wanted to work at a daycare for intellectual development kids. We've just volunteered. We didn't think twice about it. We grew up with kids, loads of kids in our neighborhood, so it wasn't unusual.
Can you talk a bit about Eunice Kennedy Shriver's involvement in the camp?
All the Shrivers were involved in the camp. Mrs. S was there every day. Mr. S, before he'd go to work, he would come down to the camp and he would spend time with campers. He was the director of the Peace Corps that President Kennedy had started. And the two older kids, Bobby was 8, Maria was 6. They were there every day with their friends, Kevin and Sheila. And they just did the same thing with the kids, just like kids do. They fit in beautifully. I mean, it was a family affair, the whole family. Even Tim, who you all know Tim, he was 2.5. He didn't turn 3 till August. The few times he was there, and I have pictures of him. Well, I have pictures of all this. He would follow his mom around. And of course, he wouldn't remember any of it, but he was very cute. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful time.
Can you tell me more about some of your favorite moments while at the camp?
There were a lot of things we liked. The one thing people need to know is people who are famous, a lot of times, will volunteer their names to different causes. That was not the case with Mrs. Shriver. She actually was at camp every day, just like we were. Only one day she didn't. She was doing stuff to promote the camp and on the news or whatever. And other than that, she did the exact same things that Ann and I did and all the other counselors. Swimming, pony rides. She drove the pony cart with a counselor and some kids so the counselor could keep the kids in the pony cart. The sports, all the stuff. We had badminton, volleyball, all different stuff, trampoline. She did everything we did, but she did not have her own camper. She wandered the camp and stopped and worked with a counselor and a camper, and then moved on and did the same thing. She did this for 3 weeks. She was wonderful.
How did the camp affect you and your sister perfection of those with intellectual disabilities?
They were just kids. I mean, the buses came from two buses, one from DC, one from Maryland, and we were all there the very first day. And this little girl waved to me, and I just grabbed her by the hand. And her name was Lila Shecut, and she was a sweetheart. And I got to know her mother, but when Lila got off the bus the second year, I grabbed her again. And I don't know what to say. It was just fun, nice kids. We did have a few characters. I'm as thankful I have all the pictures I have. It just brings it all back. But they were just kids. They weren't any different. There was one little boy who was terrified of water. I do not remember what year it was. And his counselor spent 3 weeks with this child with little toys playing in a small bucket, then a bigger bucket and a bigger bucket. By the end of the beginning of the 3rd week, she had that child sitting on a top step in the pool, and she got him down further.
During your years as a counselor, did you have the opportunity to interact with any other members of the Shriver family?
We met Mr. Shriver's mother because we ended up doing stuff with them all the time. We went to a horse show at her home in Baltimore area, to a big horse show with them. Ann and I had already met her brother, the president, all together about 20 times, went on a campaign trip with him on October 16, 1963, when we were 16, but we never told her that we had met him. I don't know why, we just never did. And then one night, Mrs. Shriver took all the counselors on the presidential yacht Guardian for dinner and dancing down the Potomac. It was a beautiful boat, got some pictures. And we were in the car with Mrs. Shriver. She was driving her light blue convertible, Bobby up front, Ann and I, Maria in the back. We're all singing camp songs. The kids liked Marching Through Georgia. That was their favorite. And next thing we know, we hear her say, "Is my brother in?" We were at the White House. Ann and I panicked. We knew he would recognize us, which he did. And that was a little bit of a shock to Mrs. Shriver, because he came first. He started walking down the corridor. Maria ran up to him. Because of his back, he could not pick her up, but he hugged her and said to her, "Maria, how old are you now?" And she said, "Still 6. So you never forget how old Maria was the first year. He walked down, took a look at Ann and I, and said, "Hi, girls. It's so good to see you again." Mrs. Shriver was kind of taken back. She said, "Jack." She always called him Jack. "Do you know the girls?" And he said, "Oh, yes, we're old friends." It was fun. So that was one of the last times we actually saw the president.
Can you tell me a bit about Eunice Kennedy Shriver's legacy and how she impacted the world for the better?
Oh, she was just such a wonderful, caring woman. She cared about everybody. She was wonderful with the children. She has a very good book out called Eunice, and there's an article, big whole part in the book on Camp Shriver, but a lot of it runs together. So Timmy can be real little in one thing she says, and then he's much older in another, but it's a very good book.
How were people's attitude toward people with AD back then? And how are people's attitudes now?
When my family lived in Gaithersburg, we had a couple next door to us that we met that were very nice. They told us they had two kids. We met the 2 kids. One day I'm outside and I see this older woman taking this little boy to a bus. And I thought, well, I didn't know who the little boy was. I had never seen this child before. So I was talking to a girlfriend across the street who was a nurse, and her husband was a doctor. And I said something to her, and she said, well, we know what it is. And nobody knew it, but they knew it in case the child has some medical problems. Things were different back then. And I'm not sure if they're still different. I think Special Olympics has really helped. I mean, these are just wonderful children.
In a few words, can you answer the question, what does inclusion mean to you?
All being together, all doing things together. Basically, the Camp Shriver was like a family. The counselors got very close to their campers. The counselors got very friendly and friends with their other campers. It was just a big family. I mean, there were 70 of us just of counselors and campers. Basically, Camp Shriver 62 was a huge success. That's why they went to 67. It just was wonderful.
Well, thank you, Mary, for joining the Inclusion Revolution Radio podcast. It was great to hear more about your experience working at Camp Shriver as a camp counselor. We appreciate all the work that you continue to do for the Inclusion Revolution.